Oh, yeah, yeah. That's that social media thing that's going on all over.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, call to order, all rise.
Please be seated. Welcome to the council meeting of January 28th. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our singer for today's national anthem, Sam Pico. Sam is an eager new artist in London, Ontario, and has been singing for most of her life while learning multiple instruments for school and for her own interest. Anyone that has heard Sam would describe her voice as warm and smooth, yet bright and clear. She's been performing around London with her partner Luke Smith, as well as entering in a Battle of the Bands contest. They have been recording together and are almost ready to be releasing their own music under Luke and Sam's Jams in the summer. Please help me welcome Sam Pico as we stand and join her in singing our national anthem. Sam, please come forward.
Hello. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Pico. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. I'll remind council members that we'll break for dinner at approximately 6:30 p.m. plus or minus as required. Colleagues, we have 3 informal recognitions. And if you would allow me, I'm first going to call on Councillor Sean Lewis for his recognition, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Colleagues, I want to introduce you to an amazing constituent of mine, Sydney Hope Vickers, who's in the gallery with us this evening. And in 2017, just before her 13th birthday, Sydney started Hope's Hugs. She had to complete a project for a course at Lord Nelson Public School. That's why I'm wearing my Lord Nelson spirit wear tonight. About what she would do to help her community if she could. Her plan, in short, was to make a hug blanket and hand it out for free to anyone who needed a hug and to give people a little hope. And that's why Worship Mayor Ed Holder is wearing the hug blanket that he was just presented with by Sydney prior to the meeting. And mine's on the back of my chair here. Sydney believed that there's times when everyone needs a hug and sometimes no one is available to give that hug. And her hug blanket wraps around you tight and gives you a warm hug. And she can be heard saying, and believes it with all her heart, that people need hope for today and hope for tomorrow. And with each hug, she also hands out a poem that she wrote when she was in grade 7. And I'll be sure to share with colleagues a copy of that. Sydney hands out hugs to people that are sick, newly diagnosed with an illness, caregivers, children who have lost a loved one, adults who are grieving, someone in hard times, people in palliative care, someone who just needs a hug and some hope. And that's included some residents in London who were impacted by the Woodman Ave explosion last year. She sent hugs from coast to coast in Canada, and even 15 went to Humboldt after the Humboldt Broncos bus tragedy. And one of Sydney's hugs laid on the bed of Lane Matchuk's bed until the day he woke up from his coma. And she still has contact with his family today. Sydney's also an active volunteer in the community and at her school. She is on the student council at Clark Road and one of the best buddies at Clark Road in the leadership program there, and has been a VON volunteer for 10 years. She's 16 and she's been a VON volunteer for 10 years. Sydney has also been chosen to represent the Thames Valley School Board, Clark Road School, and Canada in 2020 at the Canadian Student Leadership Conference in Saskatchewan, and in September then goes to speak at the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. She also, by the way, Councillor Squire will appreciate, is a keeper for the London United Soccer Club U16. In December, Sydney handed out her 500th hug, and with the order she has currently, she will have handed out over 550 by the end of February. I'm really proud to have this amazing young woman as a constituent, as a Londoner, and as a Canadian who's making a difference in people's lives and making them feel valued and appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, Sydney Hope Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I actually asked Sydney if Hope was her real middle name, and it really is her middle name, and she's done everything to live up to that. And again, please accept the appreciation of council and our administration for all the amazing work you do with the great support of your family and your friends. Colleagues, our second recognition. On behalf of our council, I would like to take a moment to honor and recognize Russ Monteith, a London lawyer, former city councillor, and all-round prominent Londoner. Russ passed away on Sunday, January 19th, at the age of 85. First and foremost, he was my old friend and an honorable gentleman. He served on city council from 1997 to 2006 as a member of what was then known as Board of Control. He returned briefly in 2014, filling the Ward 5 vacancy when Joni Beckler was appointed mayor. He did that because he cared deeply about our city. Besides his role as a politician, Russ, who specialized in estate law, also served on the boards of University Hospital, Pillar Nonprofit, and was president of the Middlesex Law Association. Because public service always played a big part in Russ's life. He always wanted to help others in his community. Russ always had a heart for London and always wanted to do what was best to make life better for Londoners. Russ will always be remembered for his incredibly calm demeanor. He was a good friend to many, highly respected and carried himself in an honorable and kind manner. He was highly approachable, and he always listened to the constituents and followed through on any concerns that were raised. People could simply trust him. Russ Monteith, you will be missed by your family, your friends, your community, and your city. We will all miss you. I'd like to ask council to stand for a moment so we can offer a moment of silence in honor of Russ Monteith. Thanks very much. Please be seated. Now, I know that Sydney gave me this because of my great support for the London Knights, and I think we've certainly gone out of our way to honor them and their leadership with the World Junior Championships. But this is the third and formal recognition that we have. And colleagues, I'm standing up here as opposed to behind my desk because I think it's appropriate, because there's no limit to the number of times we should say thank you when it is warranted. And this is especially true in your case, Martin, for all your years dedicated to building a strong London. Your impact has been felt so keenly here in London over all of your years in the city. This feels a bit like the Cher farewell tour, like it never ends, you know, and so only appropriate that we acknowledge. Is there James Bond, never say never? Martin, your impact goes beyond London to your colleagues around the province and Canada. London has taken its rightful place as a leading city in our nation, and your contributions to this success are well known. So it's my honor tonight to present to you two personal notes of appreciation for your service from the Prime Minister of Canada and from the Premier of Ontario. I'd like to read this, if I might. From the Prime Minister, dear Martin, it is my pleasure to congratulate you on a successful career and extend my best wishes on the occasion of your retirement as City Manager for the City of London. After more than 35 years with the city, you can look back on your career with a great sense of pride, knowing what a positive impact you've had on so many. By all accounts, you have been a dedicated employee and leader, whether during times of opportunity or challenge. I would like to recognize your many years of service to the City of London and thank you for your indefatigable efforts to improve the community about which you care so deeply. Martin, as you move into your next chapter, you do so with the respect and admiration of your colleagues and peers. Today, I join them in congratulating you on a retirement most deserved. I wish you all the best as you celebrate this significant milestone with family and friends. Sincerely, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. The second I have is the retirement celebrations from the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. Martin, I'm honored to add to the tributes being paid to you on the occasion of your retirement from the City of London, following more than 35 years of distinguished service. Martin, this is an ideal occasion to reflect on your many valuable contributions to the City of London, from your early days as a janitor, he knew this, at the Hamilton Road Senior Centre, to the work you undertook to advance priorities in your recent capacity as City Manager. Your dedication and hard work are well known to your colleagues who describe you in the most glowing terms and are reflected in your commitment to the highest ideals of public service. Martin, thank you for your contributions to the City of London. I offer you my very best wishes for a happy and fulfilling retirement. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario. Ladies and gentlemen, two acknowledgements from two special individuals. We've put them together in the spirit of cooperation that only Martin Hayward could pull together. Martin, please accept these.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, members of council. And I don't know how to thank the Premier and the Prime Minister, but thank you. This is something that I always love, being right out in front. And those that know me know that ain't true. So, but you know what? It's not just me. We have a phenomenal team. You're seeing many of them in front of, I'm seeing many of them in front of me. We've got a phenomenal team behind us that all make London great. I have a phenomenal team in my office that I want to recognize: Lorelei, Susie, Heather, Farron. Lorelei and Susie are up there. If I keep talking, we'll need a lot of Kleenex, so I'm not going to keep talking. But I just want to say thank you, all of you, for making just my work here such a joy. And I know there have been good times and there have been rough times, but you know what? Together we've made a difference, and we will continue to make a difference, and you will continue to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Martin said if we keep doing that, he's going to come back next week. Yeah. My wife makes Stookie toffee pudding, I'll tell you. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I've never done that from this side of the podium. Councillor Lehman.
I will disclose pecuniary interest in 8.3, number 7, the LDBA budget, as I am a member of the LDBA.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the second report of the Community and Protective Services Committee, item number 10 or 3.2 in the committee agenda, which is with respect to local health care services, I am declaring pecuniary interest as I'm an employee of the Middlesex London Health Unit.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Then we'll carry on now with the formal recognition, and it's an absolute delight to acknowledge our staff participation in the City of London's 17th year in participating in the Business Cares Food Drive. We're going to be doing a check presentation to celebrate our city's success in that participation. And I'd ask the following individuals please to come forward to be acknowledged. I'll be asking staff. In addition, I'll be asking several individuals associated with the food bank, but perhaps I could start with Wayne Dunn, Chair of the Business Cares Food Drive, Jane Roy, Co-Executive Director of the London Food Bank, Richard Hayes, Fire Deputy Chief of Operations, Matt Heptich, Deputy Chief Fire Prevention and Public Education. Yeah, we want you on this side, please. Or you can run for elected council and be on that side. It's your choice. In addition, we have a number of our corporate committee members who are staff members of the City of London, and I'd like to mention them to you and ask them to come along. I'm going to mention all the names of the committee members. I think it's appropriate. Some are in the crowd, some are in front of you, and some were just unable to make it because they're still working. Zach Machado, Heather Bunting, Aidan Prince, Jenna Friesen, Lauren Pierce, Sarah Tubman, Gary Medeiros, Anastasia Bush, TJ Hughes, Caitlin Bai, Paisley Mackey, Christine Jeffrey, Santai Sem, Mariam Khan, Dwayne Collins, Kate Green, and Kendra Teeter. So here's what we know, friends, that this year's campaign raised $22,498.45, as well as filled 2 Gaylord bins of food for the food bank. We credit our tremendous fundraising efforts to the incredible volunteers from our city staff who made this campaign such a success. A number of things they did: the 50-50 draw, the online auction, the change elves, and if you ever see Aidan Prince in an elf costume, it's worth giving money to send him away. Raffle gift baskets, used book sales, skating, and the Holly Jolly Treat Trolley. You can't say that twice. But special thanks as well, of course, to our London professional firefighters and to the employees in London City Council and to all of you who made such a difference by giving. You know, the message behind the Business Cares Food Drive is taking care of business means taking care of people. And I have to tell you, we were a significant piece of the Business Cares Food Drive, but for someone who wants to tell us a little bit more and give us a bit more insight as to how it all ended, I'm absolutely honored to include and invite to the podium my dear friend, Mr. Wayne Dunn, Business Cares Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ed, you can't believe that, eh? Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. The Business Cares has just wrapped up the 20th campaign, 20 years of it. And as Ed just mentioned, the city's been involved 17 of it. I'm happy to say we've reached another milestone. We've always done the £1 plus in addition to the previous year, 476,000 pounds of food, which is a number. But to translate that in terms of dollars and cents, what the food and all the money and checks we collected, we are well over $1 million that we've collected for this community. And that is the result of 1,500 volunteers that contribute during the campaign, many at City Hall here. Zach's on our committee, and you know some of the stories just from the city of 17 years. This check is wonderful. It's also the food that's donated out of here too, which is really amazing. Zach's on the committee, and he provides. We do the grocery weekend, 26 stores in the London area, the first weekend in December. He has a bunch of staff from various departments helping unload food in our warehouse on the Monday morning. Likewise, Jay Stanford is out picking up food for us during the campaign. And on the morning of December 20th, that we were in the warehouse with all the food prior to being loaded on trucks, Zach also has some other staff there to help us load the trucks too. So all in all, a great job from the city. I appreciate everything that's been done. Business Cares, unfortunately it's not going to go away, but with the support we have in the city here, it's just totally amazing. So thank you on behalf of our committee and Business Cares and the food bank, and Jane and I and Glenn work together all the time on it. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, Jane, the amount of food? So thank you all.
So Heather, we need you to come forward, announce the check, and formally, and ask Wayne and Jane to receive the check, formally or otherwise. So Heather, please come forward.
Behalf of the City of London and its employees.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Heather. Thanks. Thanks.
Right in front of the podium there, and that way you don't have a block there. Come on forward, folks, don't be shy. Heather, please come in. Thank you, Food Bank. Thank you, Business Cares. Thank you, City of London, including our great professional firefighters and the fire department. And with that, that concludes our formal recognitions, and we'll move back to our regular business. I am not aware of any confidential matters to be considered in public, so I'll look for a motion to go into closed session. Is there a mover? That would be Councillor Van Meerberg, seconded by Councillor Kayabaga. No comments or questions, we'll call the vote. Sorry, they didn't click in here. You need me. Am I close? I vote yes.
Councillor Van Holst. Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, will move into Committee Room 3, please. Please be seated. I'm looking for approval of the minutes of January 14th. I'll look for a mover, please. Councillor Salee, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any discussion? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Thanks very much, colleagues. I'll turn us to communications and petitions 6.1. We have a couple of things that we're dealing with here. In page 46 of your council agenda, we're looking for a motion of council convene as the approving authority pursuant to the Expropriation Act. Effectively, what we're doing is we're meeting as the approval authority to consider the staff report. So with that, I will look for a mover. Councillor Salee, seconded by Councillor Lehman. I'll ask if there's any discussion. Colleagues, I think it is appropriate that before we, even as we consider any additional discussion, just so it's clear what we're voting on, I'll ask the clerk to read the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That council convene as the approving authority pursuant to the provisions of the Expropriation Act as amended for the purpose of considering communication number 1 from the Managing Director, Environmental and Engineering Services and City Engineer with respect to the expropriation of lands for the project known as Warncliffe Road South Widening and Improvements Project between Becker Street and Springbank Drive.
Thanks very much. So this is a motion, by the way, so that we can effectively establish this approving authority. So any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed that communication 6.2 is also for expropriation of lands for Warncliffe Road South and this widening project. Are we better off convening for both of these items? I'm just concerned that there might be questions that have to do with one and the other.
Well, one gets us into the ability to talk to the other, effectively, is what it is. So what this does, this basically establishes the meeting, and 6.2 gets into the details.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Then let's vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-1.
Thank you. So now what we're doing here, again, pursuant to, we're looking forward to a motion to bring the staff recommendations that are contained in the staff report, and I will look for a mover. It would appear, based on some reticence, that it might be helpful to have the clerk explain what this next step is for us, colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify the process because council doesn't do this very often. So, and some of you have not experienced it. So I just want to ensure that you understand. So the motion you just passed was to put you from council into the approving authority under the Expropriation Act. The motion now that may come forward is based on the recommendation in the staff report contained under Communication 6.1. So you're considering that recommendation as the approving authority, not as the expropriation authority yet. So just, you're sitting as two different bodies.
So I'll ask if people have questions of the clerk before I look for mover and seconder. Are you prepared to move, Councillor Kayavaga? By all means.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to get clarification on what you just mentioned. So we're just voting to give authority to someone to make the expropriation, or like I'm not understanding what you just said. Just more clarity on that.
Through Mr. Mayor, so you're sitting as the approval authority. So the motion before you right now is as set out in the agenda. Once that has been dealt with, then the next step is you would then go out of the approving authority and go back into council, and council is the actual expropriating authority. So under the act, you have to go through two different steps.
Is that helpful? I think the point is true that we don't go through this very often. So hence why we're looking to convene as the approving authority, and then we will ultimately go into public session. Is this question, or are you moving? Moving? Moved by Councillor Cassidy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis. Sorry. Yeah, I think it would be appropriate. The clerk will read the motion.
That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Environmental and Engineering Services and City Engineer, with the concurrence of the Director of Roads and Transportation, and on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services, the following actions be taken with respect to the expropriation of lands for the project known as the Warncliffe Road South Widening and Improvements Project between Becker Street and Springbank Drive. A, the Council of the Corporation of the City of London as approving authority pursuant to the Expropriation Act as amended hereby approves the proposed expropriation of land as described in Appendix A, appended to the staff report dated January 30th, 2018. In the City of London, County of Middlesex, it being pointed out that the reason for making this decision this decision is as follows. The subject lands are required by the Corporation of the City of London for the Warncliffe Road South Widening and Improvement Project, and the design of the project will address the current and future transportation demands along the corridor, and the design is in accordance with the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study recommendations for the Western Road Widening and Improvements Project. I think that should be Warncliffe Road Widening and Improvements Project, provided by Municipal Council on February 6, 2018, and that a certificate of approval be issued by the City Clerk on behalf of the approving authority in the prescribed form. It being noted that a request for hearing of necessity in relation to Parts 1 and 2, Plan 33R20265, Parcel 8, was received and was subsequently withdrawn.
Thank you. I'll look for comments or questions from colleagues. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I recognize the sensitivity of this as we go through this process. There's two steps to this as described by the clerk, and it's a process that we don't go through very often. In fact, actually, the exercise of expropriation is probably the most extreme exercise of power within the municipal government's purview. And when we first did it last term, I had significant reservations about it. I continue to have reservations anytime we do this, and it's important that we have a discussion about why we do this and that we take it only in the appropriate circumstances. I'm glad that the community is mobilized, that they've taken the time to express their concerns and interests to us. Our challenge is to balance the local interests and citywide interests, and that's always a challenge for ward councillors. We're elected in constituencies, but we have a whole constituency, which is the City of London as a whole. In this circumstance, I'm not a big supporter of road widenings. I think road widenings create induced demand. They're just going to fill up pretty quickly as soon as we widen them. I see Wharncliffe Road as a different circumstance. In fact, right now there are 4 lanes. At the end of this project, there will be 4 lanes. It's not widening the road. It's addressing a fairly significant bottleneck in our transportation system. Further to that, there's also some significant projects that are associated with this, including a trunk sewer, changing a really unsafe grade, as well as addressing the Wharncliffe Bridge over the Thames, which has some concerns as well. This is a really massive project. On top of that, this is kind of a linchpin in our ability to be able to transform our public transit system. The ability to ensure that capacity exists on Wharncliffe allows us to be able to take a look at Wellington and our rapid transit corridors and refocus the transportation priorities onto Wharncliffe and Western Roads rather than Richmond and Wellington. These are key parts. And of course, this puts us in a place where we have to try and figure out how to reconcile the London plan, where our intent is to try and grow inward and upward and decrease the rate of sprawl and the greenlands, greenfield lands that we develop upon on the edges of the city, and rather turn that inward so that we can have infrastructure within the core of the city that supports that development. And this is part of that. And it's hard to see that. It's hard to see sitting from here, it's hard to see sitting from any place else in the city, that all of this is interrelated and it has a significant component to it. I reluctantly am in this position. It's not an easy decision for any of us to make, and especially when that decision has a face to it. And I recognize Nan's here with us tonight too, and that makes it heart-wrenching. At the outset of this, I asked staff if we could explore all possibilities to avoid this outcome, and they did. We went, and I spent a lot of time talking with engineers and saying, what if we did this? What if we did this? This is some alternatives that came from the community. What if we reduced in this area, or we shifted this way? All of those efforts were explored in full detail. And our jobs as councillors are to be satisfied that all avenues were exhausted prior to arriving at this point tonight. And I am. I'm satisfied that they have been explored. Unfortunately, we're still in this circumstance, and we have to make a decision tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Any other comments or questions? Seeing Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. I've got a question to you, to our staff. I noticed that in some of these we're expropriating part lots, and in some we're expropriating all of a lot. There's also 4 instances where the complete lot was sold under amicable terms. Now, I'm looking for staff to describe the difference between expropriating part of a lot and all of a lot. And I believe is it the expropriation method we need to go through to get part of a lot? Or I guess my question then, why didn't we just purchase on amicable terms parts of these other lots? Just for understanding, could we have that answer?
Thank you. Well, let's ask Ms. Scher for her thoughts.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask Mr. Warner to answer that question. It's related to his progress with real estate negotiations.
Mr. Warner.
Through Your Worship, so the part lots means there's a portion of the land which is for the purpose of the widening, and then when it's a whole of the lot, it means there are fully impacted properties, which means there is a widening that's going to actually interfere with the structure, the building, and therefore, as a result of that, we'd have to acquire the entire property. We are still in negotiations with those that are outstanding, and we'll continue to do so, but at this stage, due to the project timelines, we're asking for authority to initiate continuing with the process to expropriate the lands in order to have legal possession of those lands.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. So just for clarification, you're also looking to purchase the portions of lots as well. We don't need the expropriation process to get those.
Mr. Warner?
Through your worship, so we're in negotiations to acquire through agreement the portions or partial strip widenings of the land through agreement. We haven't come to terms with all the owners, and some of the owners are not in agreement with those offers. So therefore, we continue to negotiate, but at this stage, we do need to expropriate to have the legal possession of the portions of the lands required to effect the road widening project.
Councillor?
Okay. Thank you very much. That was my question. I may have a comment if later.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, and I certainly appreciate that Mr. Warner has outlined that he'll continue, despite the fact that we may start the expropriation process tonight, he'll continue to negotiate with property owners through the process as is the normal course. I noticed that in the report that there was a hearing of necessity received from one owner and subsequently withdrawn. Can you explain what a hearing of necessity is?
Mr. Warner?
Through your worship. So under the Expropriation Act, every owner is provided with a registered notice that they have an opportunity before a hearing officer appointed by the province to determine whether the expropriation or the intent to expropriate is fair, sound, and reasonably justified. There was one particular property owner who asked for a hearing of necessity, but has since decided they don't want to have that hearing of necessity because we were able to resolve their issues around the acquisition of their property.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I don't think we need to have this reread unless it's the will of council to do so. Not seeing that, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
So now I'll look for a motion to, for the meeting of the approving authority to be adjourned so that municipal council can reconvene in regular session. Is there a mover? Councillor Solis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion? I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, now item 6.2, I'm looking for a motion to bring forward the staff recommendation contained in the staff report. And I'll remind colleagues we're now back in general session. Is there a mover? Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any discussion? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Again, I think it would be appropriate, I've been reminded by the clerk, and I apologize, that the motion be read out. So would you please?
That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Environmental and Engineering Services and City Engineer, with the concurrence of the Director, Roads and Transportation, and on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services, the following actions be taken with respect to the expropriation of land as may be required for the project known as Wharncliffe Road South Road Widening and Improvements Project. A, the proposed bylaw appended as Appendix B to the staff report dated January 28th, 2020, be introduced at the Municipal Council meeting to be held on January 28th, 2020 by the Corporation of the City of London as expropriating authority with respect to the lands described in Schedule A appended to the staff report dated January 28th, 2020, the expropriated lands. The civic administration be directed to take all necessary steps to prepare a plan or plans showing the expropriating lands and to register such plans or plans in the appropriate registry of Land Titles Office pursuant to the Expropriation Act within 3 months of the approving authority granting approval of the said expropriation. The mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign on behalf of the expropriating authority the plan or plans as signed by an Ontario land surveyor showing the expropriated lands, and the city clerk be authorized and directed to execute and serve the notices of expropriation required by the Expropriation Act and such notices of possession that may be required to obtain possession of the expropriated lands.
Thank you. Before we vote, then, I will do one final. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Now we have items 6, 3, and 4. I'll turn your attention to the agenda for that, as well as item 6, 5. And I would look that the items on 6, 4 included the added letter from Baruti Law Professional Corporation be referred to the Planning Environment Committee stage for consideration. And the added item 6.5 for the 2020-2023 multi-year budget be referred to the SPPC committee stage for consideration, including a letter from T. Okansky. I'll look for a motion. We'll deal with that at once. Councillor Van Hol, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Any comments or questions? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any motions to which notice is given, so I'll look to our report section, the third report of planning environment. I will call upon Councillor Cassidy to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have been requested to pull item 7, which is 2.6 on the planning report, and I'm not aware of any others. I do actually know that I need to pull item 16, which is 4.1 from the Planning and Environment Committee report, because there is a reconsideration vote that is required for that. And as I said, nobody has told me about anything else.
Are there any items that colleagues wish to have dealt with separately? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor. If we could pull agenda item 13, which is 3.3.
Thank you. Any others that colleagues would like to have dealt with separately? So all with the exception of items 7, 13, and 16 have been moved. Any comments or questions with respect to those items specifically? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Councillor Van Meerbergen. Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Cassidy.
I'll put item 7 on the floor, which Councillor Pelosa asked to be pulled.
Comments or questions with respect to item 7, 2.6 in your agenda? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Your Worship. This application's in Ward 12. It's the concrete and asphalt factory that's being relocated from Wonderland Road over to this area. It's on a gravel and it's with a gravel pit. Just residents are concerned once City Council approved the move of this property and the designation, site plan actually doesn't lie within the city's purview. It lies within the ministry. So once we said yes, my residents are relying on the ministry to hear their concerns. Want to thank staff for working with me on being part of this report, going to the ministry. And so far, from what staff is saying, the arts group is listening to residents. Just, I'm voting no against it because that's what my residents want. And certainly when they have no control over site plan, they're concerned about their concerns.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion passes 14-1.
Councillor Cassidy.
So I will now put item 13 on the floor, which is 3.3 on the planning report.
Comments or questions? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor. This concerns 247 Halls Mill Road, the demolition request, what has become known as the Red Barn of Byron. I find it interesting that in 2008, it was slated for demolition and had the approvals, but now it doesn't. I think the request by these homeowners, the McLeods, is a reasonable request, and their request is simply this. These homeowners are looking for a little more time, and I think we should work with them and grant the time. So I will move a referral back to the next planning committee meeting. This will give them time, according to their lawyer who's representing them, Annalee Baruti, and the letter is what would be actually page 8 of the added council agenda, but it's listed as 68. The letter is very thoughtful. It's clearly they want to work with us. They even go, Annalee Baruti goes on to say that the owners undertake not to carry out any demolition activities or alterations on the property pending discussions with staff. So I think for these homeowners, the McLeods, I think the least we can do is work with them and offer this gesture of a referral to give them a little more time to work with us. So I move that referral. Thank you.
Do you have a second? Do you have a seconder, Councillor Van Meerbergen? Councillor Van Holst. Any comments or questions with respect to the referral? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I know at committee we had a lengthy conversation. I know we had a public participation meeting as well at committee. I will not be supporting this referral, and the reason I won't be supporting the referral is by postponing. I'm not exactly sure what we are asking staff to do here. The recommendation was to have a designate Halls Mills or not. And I think it's very, very important that we really understand when we refer something back to staff, what direction are we giving them? And I would like to suggest that there's no negotiations here. This is a recommendation to designate or not. And I'm not exactly sure what we're asking. The condition of the deterioration of the Red Barn or the accessory building here was due not because of neglect, but it was due to the owner taking down the building. There's a make safe order. There was already an order not to demolish without a permit. I really think it's important that we really understand what we're saying here. So that, to me, there's nothing to be gained. Designating is or not is really what the recommendation was coming to us. I understand that this came to us in 2008, and I know the councillor is aware of that. I think he did sit on the planning committee at that time. I know we've got staff here that were around in 2008, and that designation came from Latch to designate. The recommendation in 2008 was that this property had criteria for designation. The committee allowed for the designation in 2008, 2009, as part of the city process and policy. When no action is taken to demolish, it was revoked. That was 1 year, 4 months later. Now here we are in 2019-20, a make-safe order has been put on this property, which means the owner can ask for to demolish. A repair needs to be done on the building, and the property needs to be made safe with a fence. So again, to the referral, I will not be supporting this. I ask you, if you are thinking of referring this back, that you explain in a transparent way what the objective is. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that just to respond to the councillor, I don't think that's a requirement of a voting yea or nay, but I will keep the list going, and I will now turn to Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much. I can't explain why I would vote either way, nor do I have to, but I thought maybe somebody from planning could merely say, I thought maybe the councillor was going to ask that. Is there a purpose to referring the matter? Is there something constructive that appears? I'm not asking for a firm commitment, but is there an understanding that something can happen now that would be helpful? I'm also very hesitant. I love lawyers, but when you get a letter at council saying, please do this, it's very difficult because we don't have a planning committee meeting where we can investigate that and ask questions. It's much more helpful from my point of view as a councillor if people who are making representations actually come to the committee meetings and provide the committee with the information they need to move forward. So the best I think we can do right now is see from Mr. Barrett perhaps if he feels there's something constructive to do out of a referral, and I'm in his hands.
Mr. Kotsvis, Mr. Barrett, who would like to tackle that, please? Mr. Barrett, you're standing.
Through your worship, as the councillor has noted, the recommendation in front of you is to designate the property. With respect to the referral, in fact, this is dealing with the property on the register. So we're under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and maybe Ms. Anderson can also speak to this, but that does not actually have that provision that allows for the timeout for the deferral. Section 29, which is designated properties, does give that opportunity for the timeout to essentially stop the clock. In this instance, if you were to refer the matter back, even if there was a basis for further discussion, in fact, you will have deemed consent to the demolition because the 60-day clock will have expired. The applicant, if we follow through on the notice of intent to designate, does have a right of appeal to address the matter through a right of appeal. And through that discussion, there could be the opportunity to address what could be done.
I know Councillor Squire was a little tired, which is why I had to sit for a moment because he still has the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I just sat down out of reflex. I should have remained standing. I'm sorry about that. I think that provides us with the answer we need, that we shouldn't be referring this. I think it's really important when we're dealing with heritage issues. There's specific rules that need to be followed, and I think we have to stick to those and follow those. Heritage is important, and we all know it's important. And in this particular case, we've got to adhere to that process. And so I won't be supporting the referral. I also would again reiterate that if someone has an issue, there are legal remedies. There's things they need to do. They should come to committee with proper representation, and I think that's important. So I won't be supporting the referral. I want to thank Mr. Barrett for his answer. I think it was very clear.
Other comments or questions? Perhaps I could ask clarity from, and I'll let Counselor, if you want to wrap up on your referral, we will in a moment after all the questions are asked. But clarity, if I can, Mr. Barrett, when you indicated that a referral doesn't stop the clock, but I guess the only thing that does is if the referral doesn't stop the clock, but the council votes yes or no, and let's presume just no for the sake of this question, that stops the direction to have this so designated. I just want to be clear on that for the benefit of all colleagues. Could you respond, please?
Through the chair, through the mayor, sorry. This is a property that's on the register. So when there is an application to demolish the property that's on the register, council has 60 days to consider whether or not the property is worthy of designation. If you agree with the worthy of designation, issue the notice of intent. That has the effect of stopping the demolition. If you decide within the 60 days that you don't wish to issue the notice of intent to designate, well, then the default is that the demolition that was requested could go forward.
That's helpful. Thank you. Any other comments or questions before there's a wrap? That was an extension of your question, Councillor Squire. It was helpful. Did you wish to have a wrap on that?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm referring back to the letter that we got in this package, which is in the added package, which comes from, as I mentioned, Annalee Baruti, their representation, their lawyer. I think part of the issue here is that these homeowners undertook getting legal representation just a short time ago, and they're looking for time so that they can more fully apprise their case to the city, but also they want to have discussions with staff, which I think is very positive. I don't see the downside. In the letter, it goes on to say, furthermore, if council defers this matter, my clients will withdraw their request to demolish the barn for the time being in order to remove the concern that the city needs to proceed with designation within 60 days. Or it will be deemed to consent. So that position seems to be answered by their own representation. I don't see the downside of coming in to meet with staff and delaying this by one simple week. So I would ask that we give them this time. They are tax-paying residents of London who own private property where their residence resides, and they happen to have this barn. The least we can do is work with them and give them this 1 week. I can't see what the issue is here. So I thank you for that, and look for your support.
Thank you. That was the wrap. So I will now turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Excuse me. Who's calling out? Councillor Turner. Well, that was the wrap. So the quick answer is no, but the second answer is still no. Thank you. Is there a point, unless you had a point of order? Do you have a point of order, Councillor Van Holst? If it isn't, then...
Well, Your Worship, it seems that the councillor has brought up a legal issue that I don't know if I can make a decision without a question to our staff.
Sir, asking for a point of order on the legal question?
If that's it, yes. I don't believe it's a point of order, but certainly a point of clarification.
Yeah, it's not quite a point of order.
Yeah, sir. So...
But if all you're doing is challenging something that the councillor said, we've already heard from staff with respect to the issue, so I'll rule that out of order. Thank you.
Well, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will now turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Councillor Van Holst. Closing the vote, and the motion is lost, 2-13.
Councillor Cassidy.
So my motion is on the floor, Your Worship.
Comments or questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. I just want to I want to again reiterate that at committee, we had a public participation meeting. We had a good debate, good conversation. I want to thank the committee for supporting the recommendations coming forward to request a designation on the property. It is listed on the register, this property. Halls Mills is also listed as one of the 12 districts, heritage districts, to be looked at in the City of London. I know it will probably take us a while to get to that, but there is a number of other properties listed. I think barns in general, there are a number of barns as well in the city that also probably have some potential for designation. So again, I want to thank the community. It is well known that this is a property that has high criteria for designation. There is a process in place. There's also an opportunity for the owner to appeal as the process is undertaken as well. So again, I want to thank the community for coming out and also for the work that the committee did.
Other comments? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers from staff. I actually voted wrong in that last one. I'll point that out. I hope the owners look to the appeal. I just want to say that I believe our heritage preservation strategy at this point places a lot of burden on some property owners. We expect them to do a lot and pay a lot to do that. And I would like to see us look at some ways of assisting them financially. When we say that your property is as a collective asset to us, I think then that collective really needs to help support that. In some instances, this may be one of those. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Councillor Van Meerbergen. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-3.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that brings us to item 16, or 4.1 on the planning report. It's an application at 536 and 542 Windermere Road. The rezoning was approved a while ago, and there was an appeal on that rezoning. The applicants for the appeal and the applicants for the rezoning have come to an agreement, and as part of that agreement, that requires a reconsideration of the decision that was made at council. So part of the direction from council was around preservation of the existing trees on the property. So the agreement between the two parties it alters that slightly. So some of the trees that are viable, that are not invasive species, would be preserved, and then they would supplement that with additional planting. So I am moving reconsideration of the council direction. Councillor Hopkins has previously indicated that she will second that motion for reconsideration.
So noted, and I'd like to advise colleagues that for this reconsideration to be approved, we require 2/3 of council to support this. There's no debate, no discussion. I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Cassidy.
So now I would put the new and amended motion on the floor, which is the recommendation from the Planning Committee and from staff.
So it'll go up on your screen momentarily. And then invite colleagues for any questions you might have. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to say I'm happy to reconsider our decisions when some new strategies come forward, and for working with the public. Seems like another route forward in this has been achieved by staff, so I think that's great.
I just want to be clear. So you're speaking to the last thing we voted on, which had no discussion. So, but if you'd like to speak to this piece, you're welcome to.
Okay, I think, is it not on the floor? It's on the floor.
It is.
I believe you recognize me because it was on the floor.
Yes,
Okay,
but
so-
go ahead, Councillor, please. Love to hear from you.
That's, just say great. Thank you to staff. I'm glad we came up with another solution. I don't know why I'm standing here now, but I'm just going to sit down if you don't mind. Madam Chair, I love your scarf. Thank you, everyone.
And it's not even 11 o'clock. Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. Any other comments or questions with respect to the reconsideration? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, for, Your Worship. I'm happy to support this, and one of the main reasons I'm pleased to do so is because both the applicant and the community are in favor of this. So there was a lot of negotiations. Thank you to staff for the work, and again, happy to support it.
Thank you. Other comments or queries? This is on the main motion now, to be clear. Any other comments or questions? We're doing well. Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. The second report of the Community Protective Services, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and hopefully things will continue to go well. I do have to pull item 10, that's 3.2, local healthcare services. Councillor Turner indicated that he had an interest there, and Councillor Squire asked me to pull it as well so we could vote against it, so happy to pull that one.
Sorry,
Otherwise,
the second one, I didn't, you spoke a little quickly. I'm sorry, the second one?
sorry, no, Councillor Squire also asked that the same item be pulled so we can vote against it, so we have that item pulled. Otherwise, I will put the balance of the report on the floor, as I'm not aware of any other items to be pulled.
Thank you. Any other items colleagues wish to have considered? Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not trying to pull any item. I just wanted to know when would be the good portion to make a comment or maybe ask some questions to staff for item number 10, which is the housing report.
Yeah, that's going to be dealt with separately, and at that point, we'll certainly call on you for comments for sure. Item 10 is 3.2, local healthcare services you're referring to, Councillor Kayabaga? 8, absolutely. Then that can be dealt with without pulling it, just to be discussed in the agenda. Any other items those colleagues wish to have dealt with separately? Seeing none, you're moving all except number 10, Councillor Lewis? Yes. Any comments or questions on the balance with the exclusion of number 10? That would be you. Sorry, I thought you just wanted to speak to the issues, but you want them voted on separately? Can you just clarify, please?
Yes, through you. It was my understanding that Councillor Turner has pulled item number 8, and then, sorry.
He's 10, you want 8.
Okay. And 7 has to be pulled, or not 7, I'm in the wrong.
Yeah, you want 8, 2.6.
Colleagues, I just want to remind us all that right now, just to pause and collect your thoughts, that item 10 has been officially, 3.2 has been pulled for separate vote. What we can do, if it's the will of colleagues, is the balance of it goes on the consent agenda, but they can still be spoken to. So just to be clear on that, Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, just as a point of clarification and to maybe help this process along, Councillor Kayabaga would like to, I believe, hear more detail on item 8, that's 2.6, the Housing Quarterly Report, and perhaps Ms. Datersbeer might be able to offer just a couple of key highlights from that report.
Before we get there, so are you asking for it to be voted on separately, or you'd like more information on it and with Q&A possible? All right, good. Any other items that colleagues wish to have dealt with separately? Then comments or questions on all but item 10. Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to ask a few questions to staff. They're not big questions. First of all, thank you for the report. It was very informative. It's just a small question on some of the new initiatives that were mentioned in the report. Are they going to start rolling out as we approve them tonight? Because I do know that there's a lot of things that you guys have done to respond to a lot of the things that were in the report. I just wanted to know, because I was asked this question through the community, whether these are going to start right away as soon as we approve them, or if this is going to start after the budgeting process.
Ms. Datersbeer.
Thank you through the chair. So some of the new initiatives that are included in this report are already ongoing. There are some that are relate to budget submissions or business cases. So there's a combination thereof, and I'm happy to meet with you and go through them all to talk about them. But most of them have been started, including the ones that are still, I guess, part of the budget submission, things like coordinated informed response. And some of the work around the core area action plan has also been started because there are some funds associated with those initiatives.
Councillor.
Thank you. And through you, again, I just wanted to also ask a question on the London Medical Network Fund that we had allocated to the housing services, whether or not when we will be receiving a report on how that money is going to be spread out into your services.
Ms. Datersbeer.
Through the chair again, we'll be providing a report on that information over the next little while. It's also part of the budget piece, and so some of the money is going to be spent towards stabilization spaces and resting spaces, but we'll come back with a more comprehensive report at that time.
Councillor.
And my last question to you is in terms of the last time we were getting a report on housing, we did talk about playgrounds for the LMHC that the community had mentioned that had been removed, and we haven't received a report on whether or not those have been returned into the places where they had been removed. It was about 4 different locations, I think, and we were supposed to be getting a report on that, and we haven't got a report on that. Do you know when we could be getting a report on that, whether or not they have been put back in place?
Ms. Datersbeer.
Through the chair, I will check with our colleagues at LMCH and get back to you for sure on that one.
Councillor.
That's all for my questions. I just wanted to thank staff for bringing forward this report. I did connect with a few members of Mrs. Datersbeer's team, and we did have a long discussion on what is going on in the housing department, and there's a lot of moving around, and I'm looking forward to see more report on this. So good job, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, also in the housing report through you, Your Worship, I'm like many of my colleagues on council are very interested in LMCH's vacancy rate. And I know it's noted in the report. I took the time to read the board report in December that LMCH staff prepared. And I note that it seems like a substantial number of the units that are not rentable are related to pest projects or pest clearances. Is that something that is different from the trends in the past? And should an action plan be developed to deal with that? Do you think that we will see improvements in the vacancy rate, given that that is, of the 154 units, I think that's 94 of them are related to pest control?
Ms. Datersbeer.
Thank you through the chair. That is correct. A large proportion of the units that are vacant relate to two past projects, one at Simcoe Street and one at Dundas Street. I think like other landlords in the City of London, the issues of pests continue to be a significant challenge. And we see it in not only our not-for-profit sector, but in the private sector as well. There is a specific project undergoing currently at LMCH. I happen to have an opportunity to be there this afternoon to talk to them about kind of the next steps in it. But I'm happy to hopefully be able to tell you within the next month or so that some of the units that are under a significant fogging program will be cleared for renting. So I'm hoping that you will see the numbers go down. Having said that, January is a large month for people to give notice. So you may see a spike going up in the number of units become vacant. But ultimately the goal is to reduce the total number of vacancies and fill those units for people to have housing as quickly as possible.
Councillor?
Yes, and from my reading of the report, it seems like a good job is being done with the turnover of catastrophic loss and the other types of units. It was the pest component that really stood out for me, and I'm glad to hear, and I know I'm working with December numbers, that there may be some slight improvements when January's come forward. So I appreciate the work being done on this, and thank you for the update.
Thank you. Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much. Just arising out of what Councillor Kayabaga asked, my recollection was that when we decided to allocate the 7.4 million out of the London Medical Network, that money was supposed to go to purpose-built housing with supports, whether they were mental health supports. And I just want to make sure that that's still the plan. If this money is going across the housing budget for different things, that's not what my understanding was. And particularly where I've been telling people in the community who work with mental health that this money was allocated there. So I would just like some clarification around that.
Mr. Hayward?
It's the last time I'll say I need your mic. Through the chair, through your worship, the money is actually, if I look back at the business case that have come forward, is around $5 million that's being allocated to housing with supports, permanent housing with supports. There are the remainder which is being allocated towards the stabilization piece and the resting space in order to help get people off the streets into safe places so we can connect with them, so we can get them into housing with support. So that's kind of the flow of the core area action plan that we had put forward before. So,
Councillor Squire.
Yes, I have to say, and I'm not faulting anyone because I don't want to get in trouble, but that was not my understanding of what that funding. I thought it was fairly clear that that was going to go to housing, supportive housing, and that was, I'm fairly sure, I'll go back and I'll check, but that is different than what my impression was. That will have to change, that will change my messaging that I'm making to people who work in mental health as to what we're doing in that particular area. So I don't want to go any further on it, except that doesn't jive with what my understanding was.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you to our staff. The idea of housing is very clear. Sometimes I'm not sure exactly what we mean by supports. Perhaps I should rephrase that and say, I'd like more detail, perhaps in future reports on how we're spending the money on supports. So that could come forward, that'd be nice.
I'm sorry, was there a question? I didn't hear a question in there, just a preference as to what you'd like to receive?
That's right. I'm not looking for an answer today, but I think some more detail on how what those supports are and how they're implemented would be valuable in our understanding the term housing with supports.
Thank you. Before I take it back to Councillor Lewis, any other comments or questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll be very brief in my wrap. I just have a point of clarification. Since Mr. Hayward just spoke on financing, does he owe Ms. Barbone a final $20? I think she's nodding yes. I don't see him nodding yes. But I do want to echo the thanks to Ms. Datersbeer and her team for the presentation they gave us at Community and Protective Services and all the work that's been done, not only on the housing file, but I think it's important to note that work has also been done on the Employment Ontario transformation piece that's coming forward as a direction from the province. So there's been a lot of work being done by the team in that area, and this was perhaps one of the most not only comprehensive but easy to digest reports that I've received on housing in my time on council. So I want to thank her for that.
Well, beyond the thoughtful thank you, the first part of the wrap was certainly curious. All right, so with all of that, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote on this item.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and at the risk of letting Councillor Turner get to the front of the dinner line when we break, I will put item 10 on the floor. This is the local healthcare services item. The committee received a very good presentation from the Ontario Health Coalition, local representatives, with regard to the impact of some of the provincial directions and what they will have specifically in terms of impact on our public health unit, the land ambulance service, and Dearness Home in particular. So it was the committee's direction that the mayor be requested to communicate to the province our concerns and request that there's a halt to any mergers or reductions to these three areas of municipal and provincial shared responsibility. And in particular, there was a highlight of the two special funds that help support the work at the long-term care, Dearness Long-Term Care Home.
Any other comments or questions with respect to this item? Seeing none, I will turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-2 with one recuse.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm looking at the time clock here. Anything else, Councillor Lewis? Sorry.
I was just going to suggest, Your Worship, that it being 6:26, we may want to consider taking our break now before we proceed.
You're not allowed to steal my line. Sit down, please.
So noted.
It being 6, whatever he said. Colleagues, we said that we would break at or around 6:30. We have several items still to deal with, so I'll look for a motion to recess. With the, no, we've got corporate services, SPPC, and then our bylaws. We've got a motion moved by Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any discussion on the recess? If you vote yes, we break. If you vote no, we think of something else. I'll turn your attention to the screen.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 9-6.
I'd like to thank our gallery for their attendance tonight. Colleagues, let's return back at about 7:15 if we could. That's a good 45 minutes and a bit, please. Meeting recessed. Please be seated. Colleagues, we now have the third report of the Corporate Services Committee. Councillor Kayabага.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put the third report of the Corporate Service Committee on the floor, except for item number 7, because there's a conflict of interest.
Item number 7, are there any other items that colleagues wish to have dealt with separately? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Your Worship, I just have a comment on the 2.8, the memorandum of understanding.
Would you like to do that when we go through the consent? We'll call on you just a moment?
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Any others that wish to be, though, removed? Seeing none. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hopkins?
You're just moving way too fast for me. Thank you. I just want to make a comment regarding the memorandum of understanding with the Namarand Friendship Center. I understand this is the first time that we've had a memorandum of understanding with the urban Indigenous community, and really pleased to see this coming to us. I know we're probably meeting a couple times a year, but the importance of even having this is something that I would encourage all my colleagues to sort of visit the center or be in touch and get to know the center. They do a lot of good work in the community. And again, just thank you to staff for the work that was done on this.
Thank you. Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was taking a look at the sorry, I just get the name of it, assessment growth for 2020 and changes in taxable phase and values and shifts in taxation as a result of reassessment. So it's a be received report. I was trying to translate the tables in Schedule A and having a bit of a challenge figuring out exactly what was in Schedule B and C being implied. Is as a result of this a shift in the ratios, or is this just to say what the current state is, and that eventually there may be a requirement to make a shift in ratios as a result?
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. So this is, if we were to do absolutely nothing, it just shows you with the next phase-in of the assessment values, what the shifts have occurred in terms of the phase-in of the assessment from the 2016 amounts that are currently going to be fully phased in. So this is if there is absolutely no changes whatsoever. So the next step now, we will be bringing forward the future tax policy report, which will show all of the various ways in which council can look at how to equalize, and there's a number of different options we typically present so that you can make those choices in terms of setting your tax policy going forward.
Councillor Turner.
I think that makes sense. So that would be the future tax policy report that's referred to at the end. And okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I wanted to make two comments. The first related to the BIAs, and I realize one's been pulled, but I'll talk about BIAs in general. I know the committee didn't have a lot of discussion on the BIA budgets, but we certainly reviewed them, and I know a number of us sit on BIAs. They're doing good work across the city. I think these are very responsible budgets, and when you look at the types of projects that businesses are taxing themselves to achieve in our city, oftentimes offsetting what would be municipal contributions or providing enhancements beyond those, it's great that we have these organizations in our city to rely on. On the assessment growth piece, I think it's great that the numbers continue to be strong in assessment growth. Obviously, there's a lot of growth happening in the city. There will be business cases that will come forward to use up what could be all of the money, but most of that money. And it's nice to have the level of assessment growth there to be able to fulfill those needs. And there was a gentleman during our budget debate last Thursday who said, do you have any idea how much the properties are assessed at and what their values are and how they're changing over time? Well, in case you're wondering, the answers are in this report. It's the tables that Councillor Turner was referring to, showing how the assessment growths
weighted assessments are changing, both with the phase-in assessments as well as between the different tax classes. So there's a lot of information in there. They're very valuable reports to have and to be able to look at. And I know when we do our tax policy, all of this will be available to us as well as explanations on exactly what they all mean and how they all work. It's a very complicated tax system, so I'm not surprised that we get questions sometimes in the budget process, but this is a good report for people to refer to as well. So thanks to their work on that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I'd echo the comments on the BIs made by Councillor Morgan. I also point out that we treat the BIs very differently and accommodate them differently, and I think that's fine, and it's a path we can go forward, but they do great work. I have a teeny example here. Here's the latest version of the Hamilton Road Tree Trunk Tour coloring book. Looks wonderful. So these kinds of things are happening around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we are calling the third report with the exception of item 7. I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Kayavaga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put item 7, which is 2.6, on the floor.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14 with 1 recuse.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is all for the corporate service agenda.
Thank you very much. We have the third report of council in closed session. Councillor Lehman.
I'd like to report progress made on the matters discussed in camera.
Looking for a mover to accept that succinct report. Councillor Kayavaga, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Looking at the third report of Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, Deputy Mayor Helmer, please.
Thank you. I'll put all items from the report, the third report, on the floor except for 4 or 5.1, which is the proposed changes to the City Manager Search Committee. I'm going to deal with that one separately. It requires reconsideration, and there's an amendment sheet which has been circulated as well. So I'll put all the other items on the floor.
Any other items colleagues wish to have dealt with separately? Any discussion with the exception of 5.1?
The clerk is waving me down. I think she's hoping we can make an appointment on 5, so I'll also pull 5.
So we'll deal with 5.2 separately then, Deputy Mayor? Okay, thank you. So 1 through, all except 5.1 and 5.2. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, I will move, seek leave to reconsider the terms of reference for the City Manager Search Committee. As you know, we unanimously approved those terms of reference in October.
Is there a secretary for that? Councillor, thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I'll remind colleagues for this to go forward, it requires 2/3 votes of all of council. Any comments or questions? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the rest of the recommendation from SPPC on the floor, and then I will put an amendment on the floor, which is to add a Part C, which is notwithstanding Section 2.6 of the Council Procedure Bylaw, approval be given for the above noted SPPC meeting to be held at a location other than City Hall. So that's a
Seconded by
slight
Councillor
difference
Lewis.
from our committee recommendation. Hopefully there's a seconder.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lewis is seconded. Comments or questions? See none, we'll call the vote. To be clear, this is on the amendment.
Just having some technical difficulties. One moment, please.
Colleagues, we know the number is wrong, but we'll I just ask for your indulgence. We'll fix that, but we turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the rest of the clause as amended on the floor.
Seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Any comments or questions? Well, then let's vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
I will put item 5 or 5.2 on the floor. This is the resignation of Councillor Maureen Cassidy from RBC Place London Board of Directors, and as you will recall, we referred an appointment of a replacement to this meeting.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cassidy.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if now is the appropriate time to move a nomination?
No, it is not.
Okay.
We're just resigning you first.
Got to get rid of me first before
Yes,
you
we
nominate
do.
someone else. Okay, thank you.
This is with respect to the resignation of Councillor Cassidy. Councillor Lewis, you have something to add?
Indeed, Your Worship. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Cassidy for the work she's done on this board, whether it's the RBC Convention Centre or the Covent Garden Market or Tourism London. All of these boards and commissions that we're involved with really do matter to the city, and it always does take time out of our schedules that we could be spending with family and friends. And I know Councillor Cassidy has nothing but the best reputation with the folks over at RBC Place, so I just want to thank her for her work there.
Thank you. Any other comments or nice things to say about the councillor? Seeing none, not that they don't have any. Then we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Deputy Mayor.
I guess now would be the time for an appointment.
A really good time. Is there a second? Councillor Cassidy.
Yes, I would like to make a nomination. I would like to.
Absolutely.
I would like to nominate Councillor Turner for the board of RBC Place.
Is there a seconder? Lots. Councillor Pelosi. Since you're sitting beside him, it's probably nicest. No disrespect to anybody else. Any other nominations? Oh, sorry. What do you think about that idea, Councillor Turner?
Your Worship, I'd be proud to accept the nomination. Thank you, Councillor Cassidy.
Since you were the only one we ignored, it was actually prudent we ask you as well. Seeing no other discussion, we'll call the question. Well, we'll pick one from time to time. What do you think?
We'll see if you're paying attention.
Folks, can we, we'll clean that up, but it's understood. It's Councillor no name, the generic councillor, and somebody may show, we hope. So we know who that is. Any other comments or
Are you
questions?
taking it down? We're getting ready to close.
I knew we would. I tend to find with desserts, when there's too much sugar in it, it has an impact, you know?
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Congratulations, Councillor Turner, and as has been noted, thank you, Councillor Cassidy. So I'm not aware of any deferred matters, nor inquiries, nor emergent bylaws, so let's deal with emergent motions, so let's deal with the bylaws if we can. We have a number in front of you, and what I am doing is I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the introduction and first reading of bills 53 through 57, 59 through 74, 76, and 77. So what we're doing is we are dealing with Bill 58 separately due to a conflict as denoted by Councillor Lehman, and Bill 75 separated as there is a colleague who is opposed. So all except 58 and 75, I'll look for a mover. Mover, Councillor Slee, seconded Councillor Van Holst. We'll call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, colleagues. I'll look for mover and seconder of second reading of bills 53 through 57, 59 through 74, 76, and 77. Is there a mover? Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Comments or questions? Are we good, Councillor Van Meerberg? Are we good? All right, good. Then we'll call the question.
Sorry. Councillor Lehman. Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, I'll look for a mover and seconder for third reading and enactment of bills 53 through 57, 59 through 74, 76, and 77. Is there a mover? Councillor Salee, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. We call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
I'll look for a mover and seconder for introduction, first reading of Bill 58. Is there a mover? Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Turner. I call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recuse.
I'll look for a mover and seconder of second reading of Bill 58. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Comments or questions? Seeing none, we call the question.
Councillor Cassidy. Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recuse.
So I'll look for a mover and seconder of third reading enactment of Bill number 58. Councillor Kayabага, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. We call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recuse.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm looking now for a mover and seconder for the introduction of first reading of Bill 75. Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. I call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 to 1.
I'm looking for a mover seconder for second reading of Bill 75. Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, we call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-1.
Colleagues, I'm looking for mover and seconder of third reading enactment of Bill 75. Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. I call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-1.
Thank you, colleagues. Before we adjourn, a couple of things, as is our custom and totally justified. I'd like to acknowledge the great work of our staff. These busy times, we've got budget, city manager search, and a number of things that we're dealing with, plus the stuff that is maybe ordinary to you, but extraordinary to us. So thank you for the work that you do. And it gives me a chance, as part of the Sheriff Farewell Tour, to say again to Martin, that we'll miss you, sir. And as much as you were uncharacteristically forward and characteristic is your graciousness, I got to tell you, we're going to miss you, and we don't want you to be a stranger, especially if you're buying lunch, which is rare in my experience. But I would tell you that, that sincerely you have been an impact player, and if in life it's about difference makers, you're absolutely one of those. Even Justin and Doug figured that out. So thank you from all of us. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Kayabaga. Hand vote. All those in favor? That looks fairly unanimous. Meeting adjourned.